Hey y'all, you made it to episode one. You hear that? You hear that bottle pop? That means that you did not miss your dose today. And we're in here. We're in episode one. Let's go. So you're going to hear that bottle shake every time because that means you're here, you're adherent, you're catching up on this episode. And here we are. Can you believe it? Episode one. So my name is Dr. Liv, Dr. O. I'm your host, and really just want to take the time today to let you know who I am. Who am I? And so, full disclosure, I'm traveling this week. I'm in DC for work at a work conference. It's been really impactful and enlightening, learning a lot. But tonight, I'm hanging out with you guys and really just want to introduce myself to you all. But one of the things that I want to do is ensure that when I introduce myself, I don't want to talk about what I do, what my profession is, how many degrees I have, my accolades, my accomplishments, none of that. And the reason for that is because I've hidden behind all of that for far too long. And about 2.5 months ago, I pursued a leadership development cohort. It was a boot camp. It was phenomenal. And the leader of that space had us introduce ourselves, not by our accomplishments, not by our profession, just who are we? And I had like a really, really, really hard time. And part of it is because I have not known who I was for the longest time. I allowed my accomplishments and my career and my profession, my title to speak for who I was for far too long. But outside of that, I didn't know who I was. Like, who is Olivia? So that's what we're going to talk about on this podcast episode is who are you authentically, genuinely? How would you introduce yourself to someone that didn't know you without what you do every day? And while what you do every day might be purpose work, there's still so much more to you when you introduce yourself. So, had a really hard time with that exercise. But in reflection, I realized that a huge part of who I am is not connected to what I do every day. I think what I do every day is postured in my heart posture of service. It's postured in my desire and willingness to give back, but it's not like who I am. And because I didn't know who I was, I allowed people who came into my life to define who I was for me. And that never ended well. And so what I began to do was abandon myself. I wasn't in alignment with my core values. And so in order to live well, you got to know who you are. And I just now at 37 am coming into who is Olivia? Like, who am I? What do I bring to the table? Who am I as a person? And we'll get into in future and subsequent episodes like what I do and the purpose of this podcast. But I would argue that the foundation of this podcast is really who I am as an individual. And so lately, as I've embarked upon this journey, have been reflecting on who I am as a person, as a 37-year-old single Christian woman who is highly motivated, who has a lot of big dreams, who's accomplished. See, there I go. We're leaving that out. I'm not talking about accomplishments. So, who am I? And I want you to think along this process as we unpack who I am. Who are you? And how would you introduce yourself in a room when someone says, "Hey, like, how are you? I'm Olivia and this." So, probably 6 months ago, I would have said, "I'm a pharmacist. I used to practice in a community setting, a retail setting. I transitioned out of that space, moved on to a community engagement role that I built from the ground up, transitioned from there, became a director of pharmacy, went back to school in a global pandemic, got a master's in public health. I'm a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated." But like, is that like, do you get, is that really like who I am? Like, what else? Like, that even sounds so annoying because that's what I always say, right? And then people create their own narrative of who I am based on that snapshot, that high level overview. But really, deep down inside, I'm really shy. I'm actually shy sometimes. I love being by myself. I'm an only child, so growing up, I figured out how to entertain myself. I am an only child. I love my parents. They're my whole world. People will probably say that I have only child syndrome. I don't know what that is, but we'll go with it. But when I think about who I really, really am, like truly, right? I'm just a genuine, super nice person who really has wanted from others, oftentimes, what I give them, I want in return. And I think along this journey of life, I've learned that you're not going to always get a you from other people. And that has caused me to be jaded in a lot of areas in my life. I think it's allowed me to be discouraged that I'll never find someone who truly understands me because they don't give back what I give them in return. Um, and I really had to heal from expectations of other people and really had to really figure out who I was. And as a result of this self discovery and healing journey that I'm on, I've been able to really figure out like who I am. And I want to encourage each of you to really think about who you are authentically, not what someone told you you were, not what life has thrown at you, not a jaded version of you. But if you could just show up with joy and happiness in your authenticity, who would you be? And I think in my profession, I've had to become really hard at times to navigate spaces that weren't built for me. I've been treated unfairly because of how I present. And for a very long time, I allowed that to really seep into the way that I was showing up and behaving. But I've learned over time in therapy and through just really my relationship with Jesus that I am fearfully and wonderfully made. God has made me in his image, and everything that I am is because of him. Nothing that I have is because of anything that I've done on my own. It's all because of God's glory. And so when you know who you are, there are certain things that you just don't engage in. It doesn't mean that you're not cool or, come on, let's hang, let's do this. And I did that for a very long time. But here recently, I'm learning that there are just certain things that I can't do because it's not authentically me. And the more that I change for other people, the more that I succumb to what other people want me to be, it doesn't end well. I am resentful to the person. I'm resentful to myself because I wasn't authentic to me. And when you think about who you are, when you're at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, when you go to sleep at night, that is how you should introduce yourself to the world because that's who you genuinely are. Now, there are so many other things that make up who you are, right? But to me, those should really be secondary. Like, because if I say, like, hey, I'm a pharmacist, someone is already making up in their mind what they think a pharmacist should be, how I'm supposed to show up. And I guarantee you that every single time I don't show up in the way that folks think. Oftentimes, people don't even think I'm a pharmacist. I'm too young. I'm Black. I'm a woman. All of these things. Like, even the conference that I'm at right now in DC, tons of white men here. And I noticed the way that I was showing up here was what's the word? I was retracting because I'm around people who don't look like me. It's a little foreign to me, the concept of, why we are here in terms of the conference is a concept that I'm familiar with and I work in it every day, but it's not my strong suit. And so that's why you have to know who you are because in any arena, in any setting, in any platform that I'm given, I know that I am a child of God. I know that Jesus is the head of my life and he is with me always. That is who I am. Now, I'm not saying that that's who you are and who you have to be, but I encourage you to think about how you show up. And if someone were to ask who you are, what is one word that you would use to describe yourself? And for me, I would say I am dynamic. I am open to growth. I am a leader. And I am tired of playing small to make other people feel comfortable. That's who I am. And all the other stuff you might find out. I would rather you find it out just by the work that I do. I'm not a huge, like, oh, this is what I do. You should know me. No, I want the work that I do in the community and in this world to speak for itself because it's the work that God has called me to. So it is possible that you can be a big fish in your pond, in your network, but inside you still feel so small because you haven't figured out who you are. So I really want to encourage you to figure it out. And it is not easy. There's so much that came up for me in the quest to finding out who I was. For example, I started drinking in college. So I definitely waited until I was 21. I remember that. And I never an alcoholic, but definitely a social drinker. Um, Definitely have been drunk several days of my life. And that doesn't serve me. It's not who I am. But I was so conditioned to, oh, let me just have a drink or just one drink, or I just have one or two drinks. And then I just decided, like, hey, like, that's not for me. I don't make good decisions. I feel like I'm not myself. And I just had to change the narrative of who I am, and that's okay because guess what? Nobody defines who I am. And who I associated myself with during that season, or if someone is uncomfortable with who I am becoming, that's also okay. Seasons change, but never worry about who leaves when you make a stance to be who you are authentically. because that is just an indicator that they were never supposed to share space. Your precious space. They were never supposed to share that space with you to begin with. So I hope that this episode has encouraged you to think about who you are, who you are as a person. What does that look like? Living well means living in your authenticity, in your truth. And your truth is your truth. It's not for anybody else. And so the foundation of this journey is a self-discovery back to who you are authentically. And it might cause some tears, and it might cause some shifts in your relationships, in your personal friendships, and lifelong situations that you've had, or maybe some situationships. But you have to be willing to no longer abandon who you are at the expense of someone else. So, this is your daily dose. Make sure you come back next week, same time, Tuesdays at 9 p.m. for content. And it's been a pleasure to share space with you. Good night.